Sirens painted the damp asphalt red and blue, signaling the end for what two corrupt officers thought was just another easy target. They had planted 3 kilos of heroin in her trunk, grinning at their brilliant frame-up. They had no idea the woman in handcuffs was a federal agent. The streets of South Baltimore were unforgiving, a labyrinth of decaying row houses and forgotten industrial zones where survival often meant looking the other way. For many agonizing months, Lila Langston had lived and breathed the damp, exhaust-choked air of these streets. At 32, Lila was one of the Drug Enforcement Administration's most elite deep cover operatives. She didn't just play a role, she inhabited it completely. To the local underworld, she was Vanessa Holt, a cold, calculating logistics broker who could move anything from point A to point B without drawing the attention of the authorities. Her current assignment, Operation Undertow, was the culmination of years of intelligence gathering. The primary target was Silas Granger, a phantom-like cartel distributor whose network pumped millions of dollars of narcotics through the eastern seaboard. Silas was notoriously paranoid, operating through a web of burner phones, dead drops, and cutouts. Lila had meticulously earned her way into his inner circle, sacrificing her personal life, her sleep, and her peace of mind to build an airtight federal indictment. On that pivotal night, the trap was finally set to snap shut. Lila was driving a nondescript dark gray Chevy Malibu, the tires hissing against the rain-slicked pavement. In the trunk sat a heavy black canvas duffel bag containing exactly $500,000 in unmarked, non-sequential bills, official DEA funds authorized for a massive controlled buy. That night, she was going to exchange the cash for a shipment large enough to put Silas away for 3 consecutive life sentences. Hidden beneath the collar of her leather jacket was a state-of-the-art microcellular transmitting wire. Miles away in a heavily armored surveillance van, her commanding officer, Captain Dominic Vale, was monitoring her every breath, backed by a heavily armed tactical extraction team. Everything was proceeding with surgical precision. But the streets, as Lila well knew, possessed a chaotic heartbeat of their own. Enter Officer Blaine Mercer and Sergeant Corbin Slate. Mercer and Slate were predators wearing badges. Assigned to the city's anti-gang task force, they had long ago abandoned the oath they swore to protect and serve. Over the years, they had morphed into a rogue outfit operating their own localized cartel. Their modus operandi was brutal and highly lucrative. They targeted mid-level dealers, conducted illegal traffic stops, confiscated the narcotics and cash, and then planted their own diluted drugs to justify the arrests. They would keep the stolen money, sell the high-grade stolen drugs through their own street-level distributors, and pat themselves on the back for keeping the crime statistics looking active. They were bullies intoxicated by their own untouchable authority. Earlier that evening, Mercer's network of confidential informants had picked up a whisper. A major player was moving a massive amount of capital through the industrial district. The informant didn't know about Silas Granger or the DEA. They only knew that a woman driving a gray Malibu was sitting on a gold mine. Mercer, a man whose greed was matched only by his arrogance, saw an opportunity too good to pass up. Sitting in the driver's seat of their unmarked cruiser, he tapped the steering wheel rhythmically. $500,000, Corbin. That's the whisper, just rolling around in the trunk of some independent contractor. Sergeant Slate, a heavy-set veteran with a cynical sneer permanently etched onto his face, chuckled from the passenger seat. Independent means no cartel retaliation. We hit her, we take the bag, we toss a couple bricks of that Seas Brown we kept from the warehouse raid last month into her back seat. Case closed. She goes away for trafficking. We retire to the Bahamas. It was a flawless plan in their eyes. They had executed variations of this shakedown dozens of times. They targeted the guilty, knowing that criminals couldn't exactly call the police to report a robbery by the police. They believed they were the apex predators of the asphalt jungle. As Lila navigated her Malibu toward the rendezvous point, her eyes constantly scanning the mirrors, a pair of blinding headlights suddenly flared behind her. "Vanessa, this is Vale." The voice crackled faintly in her hidden earpiece. "You've got a tail. Unmarked unit. City plates." Lila's pulse spiked with a jolt of adrenaline, though her hands remained completely steady on the leather-wrapped steering wheel. "Silas's guys," she murmured softly, barely moving her lips. "Negative," Vale replied, the tension suddenly thickening in his voice. "We ran the plates. It's local PD task force unit. We don't have local PD looped into Operation Undertow to prevent leaks. They are flying blind, Lila." Before Lila could formulate a contingency, the cruiser's light bar erupted into a strobing frenzy of red and blue, cutting through the heavy rain. A sharp blast of the siren echoed off the concrete walls of the abandoned factories surrounding her. "They're pulling me over," Lila whispered, easing her foot onto the brake pedal. "Stand down, Lila," Vale instructed rapidly. "Play the civilian. Do not blow your cover. Silas's scouts might be watching the route. If they see you flash a badge to get out of a stop, the entire operation goes up in smoke." Lila understood the grim mathematics of undercover work. To catch a kingpin, you had to endure the dirt. She pulled the Malibu onto the gravel shoulder, the crunch of the rocks loud over the idling engine. The rain drummed a relentless rhythm against the roof of her car. She killed the engine, rolled down the window, and waited, watching the side mirror as two figures stepped out of the unmarked cruiser. She had no idea she was about to become the victim of the city's most corrupt cops, but she was entirely prepared to let them hang themselves. The heavy footsteps splashed through the puddles as Officer Mercer approached the driver's side, his heavy maglite flashlight held high, the beam intentionally blinding Lila. On the passenger side, Sergeant Slate hovered near the rear quarter panel, his hand resting casually but menacingly on the grip of his service weapon. "License, registration, and insurance, now," Mercer barked, his voice dripping with forced authority. Lila squinted against the glaring light, playing her part flawlessly. She adopted the persona of a slightly annoyed but compliant civilian. "Officer, is there a problem? I was just heading home. I don't believe I was speeding." "I didn't ask for a commentary, lady," Mercer sneered, leaning in closer. The smell of stale coffee and stale cigarettes wafted into the car. "Your tail light is out, license and registration." Lila reached slowly into the glove box, making sure her movements were deliberate and visible, and handed over the forged documents identifying her as Vanessa Holt. Mercer took the cards, barely glancing at them before slipping them into his pocket. "Step out of the vehicle," Mercer commanded. "For a broken taillight?" Lila asked, allowing a hint of genuine-sounding panic into her voice. "I really don't feel comfortable stepping out in the pouring rain." "This isn't a request," Mercer shouted, violently yanking the door handle. The door swung open and he grabbed Lila by the upper arm, hauling her roughly into the wet night. He slammed her against the side of the Malibu, kicking her legs apart to conduct a harsh, aggressive pat-down. Vale, Lila thought desperately, hoping the hidden mic was picking up the sickening thud of her body hitting the metal frame. In the surveillance van, Captain Vale's knuckles were white as he gripped the console. He was surrounded by 4 tactical agents who were practically begging to breach the scene. "Hold your positions," Vale ordered, his voice a low growl. "Let them commit the crime. We have high-definition audio and visual from the dash cam and the wire. We are about to bag 2 dirty cops along with Silas." "Search the car, Corbin," Mercer called out over the sound of the rain. Slate didn't bother with a warrant or probable cause. He popped the trunk with a violent push of the internal button. Lila's heart hammered against her ribs. She turned her head just enough to see Slate standing over the open trunk. The silence that followed was heavy, pregnant with the weight of $500,000. Slate unzipped the heavy canvas duffel bag. Even in the dim ambient light of the street lamps, the sheer volume of the banded currency was staggering. Slate's breath hitched. He looked up, making direct eye contact with Mercer. A silent, venomous communication passed between the 2 corrupt officers. They had hit the jackpot. "Well, well, well," Slate said, his voice trembling slightly with adrenaline and greed. He zipped the bag back up and effortlessly hoisted it over his shoulder. He then reached into the deep pockets of his tactical cargo pants. Lila watched, her trained eyes catching every subtle movement, as Slate pulled out 2 densely wrapped rectangular bricks sealed in brown tape. Heroin confiscated from God knows where, repurposed as the ultimate weapon of framed guilt. He tossed the bricks carelessly into the trunk of her Malibu, right where the cash had been seconds before. "Look what we have here, Blaine," Slate called out in a falsely dramatic tone. "Looks like we got ourselves a major trafficking operation." Mercer grinned, a sickening display of teeth in the shadows. He shoved Lila face first into the cold, wet roof of the car. "Vanessa Holt, you are under arrest for the possession and distribution of a Schedule I narcotic." Cold steel snapped around Lila's wrists, biting sharply into her skin as Mercer ratcheted the handcuffs uncomfortably tight. "You're making a mistake," Lila pleaded, her voice cracking perfectly, a masterclass in feigned desperation. "That isn't mine. I've never seen those packages before in my life. You just put those there." Mercer leaned in, his hot breath against her ear. "Who are they going to believe, sweetheart? 2 decorated officers of the law or a street-level mule driving through the warehouse district in the dead of night. You're going away for a very, very long time. They dragged her through the mud and shoved her violently into the plastic-molded back seat of their cruiser. The heavy metal grating separated her from the front seats. As the door slammed shut, plunging her into darkness, Lila let the terrified persona drop for a fraction of a second. A cold, hard look of absolute determination washed over her face. Up front, Mercer and Slate were euphoric. They tossed the heavy duffel bag of federal money onto the floorboards. $500K, easy, Slate whispered, slapping the dashboard. We split it 60-40, stash it in the offshore accounts, and let the public defender deal with Vanessa. Perfect crime, brother. Mercer laughed, putting the cruiser in gear and pulling away from the scene, leaving the Malibu waiting for an impound tow. In the back seat, Lila shifted her weight, making sure the wire beneath her collar was unobstructed. I copy all of that, Vale, Lila whispered silently into the darkness of the cruiser. They took the bait, the hook, and the sinker. We have them on tape admitting to the frame-up and the theft of federal funds. Vale's voice crackled back, laced with a dangerous satisfaction. Lila, I know it's miserable, but you need to ride this out through the booking process. We need them to log the fake drugs into evidence and falsify the arrest reports. Once they put their signatures on those official federal and state documents, the trap is locked. The FBI corruption unit is already spinning up. The ride to the precinct was a nightmare of humiliation. Mercer and Slate bragged openly, practically spending the stolen DEA money in front of her, completely oblivious to the fact that every syllable was being transmitted directly to a federal server. When they arrived at the precinct, the nightmare escalated. The precinct was a chaotic, fluorescent-lit purgatory. Lila was dragged out of the car, paraded past a dozen other officers who barely looked up from their paperwork. She was pushed into the processing room, forced to strip off her wet jacket and empty her pockets. Stand against the wall, the booking sergeant demanded. Flashes went off, fingerprints were rolled. She was officially entered into the criminal justice system as a major narcotics trafficker. Mercer stood by the booking desk, sipping a cup of coffee, looking incredibly pleased with himself. He was busy filling out the arrest report. He meticulously documented how they had initiated a lawful traffic stop, gained probable cause, and discovered the 2 kilos of heroin. He entirely omitted the existence of the $500,000 in cash. Make sure you lock her in holding cell 4, Mercer told the booking officer. No phone calls until she's fully processed. She's a flight risk. The heavy steel bars of holding cell 4 slammed shut behind Lila. The echoing clang finalized her temporary imprisonment. She sat down on the hard, cold metal bench, the scent of urine and bleach overwhelming her senses. Outside the bars, Mercer and Slate high-fived each other before walking out the double doors, heading off to divide their newly acquired fortune. They thought they had broken a weak link in the cartel. They thought they had secured their retirement. They didn't know that the woman sitting quietly in cell 4 wasn't crying. She was counting down the hours until the wrath of the United States federal government came crashing through the precinct doors. The countdown to their absolute destruction had just begun. Morning sunlight struggled to pierce the grime-caked windows of the precinct, casting a sickly yellow hue over the holding cells. Lila had spent the long hours sitting on a steel bench, enduring the indignities of the system she had sworn to uphold. She hadn't slept. Every time a uniform walked past, they threw her a look of utter disgust, the kind reserved for society's absolute worst. She absorbed their scorn in silence, knowing that the wheels of a massive federal machine were turning just out of sight. Across town, in the quiet, affluent suburb, Officer Blaine Mercer and Sergeant Corbin Slate were celebrating. They had retreated to Mercer's detached garage, a heavily fortified space where they usually conducted their off-the-books business. On a rusted metal workbench, surrounded by empty beer bottles, lay $500,000 in banded stacks of $50 and $100 bills. "Look at this, Corbin," Mercer breathed, running his fingers over the crisp paper. "This is our exit strategy. We launder this through the car wash front over the coming months, and we are ghosts, Belize, Costa Rica, wherever the hell we want." Slate took a long swig of his beer, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. "We earned this, brother. The city pays us peanuts to take bullets. Consider this our hazard pay." "What about Vanessa, the pierced woman?" Mercer scoffed, tossing a stack of bills back onto the pile. "She's getting arraigned later today. I already filed the official police report and swore the affidavit. Judge Theodore Lang is on the bench, and you know how he feels about cartel heroin. He's going to deny her bail and she'll sit in county lockup for a long time before she even sees a trial. By the time she opens her mouth, we'll be drinking margaritas on a beach. What neither Mercer nor Slate knew was that the moment they unzipped the DEA's duffel bag, they triggered an invisible avalanche. Every single bill on that workbench was micro-stamped with invisible ink, and their serial numbers were logged in a heavily encrypted federal database. Furthermore, a micro GPS tracker, no thicker than a single sheet of paper, was woven into the canvas lining of the bag. From a secure command center downtown, Captain Dominic Vell, along with Special Agent Ronan Pierce of the FBI's Public Corruption Unit, were watching a blinking red dot on a digital map that pinpointed Mercer's garage with agonizing precision. They just signed the affidavits, Agent Pierce announced, handing a freshly faxed document to Captain Vale. The document bore the official signatures of Blaine Mercer and Corbin Slate, swearing under penalty of perjury that they had recovered 2 kilos of heroin during a routine lawful traffic stop. Vale smiled, but the expression didn't reach his eyes. They just upgraded their crimes from localized theft to federal wire fraud, evidence tampering, and felony perjury. The trap is completely locked. Back at the precinct, a well-dressed man carrying a leather briefcase walked up to the booking desk. He bypassed the usual public defender queue and presented a gold shield credential to the desk sergeant. "I need to see my client, Vanessa Holt, now," the man demanded. The sergeant blinked, recognizing the insignia. "Federal prosecutor? What's the DOJ doing with a street-level mule?" "That is heavily classified," the attorney replied coldly. Minutes later, Lila was escorted into a cramped, windowless attorney-client interview room. The door clicked shut, leaving her alone with the man. As soon as they were in private, the man relaxed his posture and offered a warm smile. It was Assistant United States Attorney Everett Crane. "You look terrible, Lila," Crane whispered, opening his briefcase to reveal a steaming cup of black coffee and a fresh bagel. Lila grabbed the coffee, letting the heat sink into her freezing hands. "You try sleeping on a slab of iron while a guy in the next cell screams about government conspiracies. Tell me we have them." "We have them," Crane confirmed, sliding a thick file across the table. "They filed the paperwork. They logged the heroin into the precinct's evidence locker. The FBI secretly swapped it out shortly after to test it. It's a 60% purity mix, identical to the batch they supposedly incinerated last month. They're double-dipping, stealing evidence, and planting it." "And Silas?" Lila asked, her mind still partially on her primary cartel target. "Because you didn't blow your cover, Silas's scouts just think a random mule got busted," Crane explained, his eyes gleaming. Silas reached out to his secondary broker shortly after to replace the lost cash. "Tactical is moving on his compound tonight. Operation Undertow is a complete success, Lila. But first, we have some housekeeping to do." Lila took a slow, deliberate sip of her coffee. The exhaustion vanished, replaced by a razor-sharp anticipation. "How are we playing the takedown?" "Oh," Crane chuckled, a ruthless sound echoing in the small room. "We are going to give them the stage they think they deserve." That afternoon, the atmosphere inside the precinct was abruptly shattered by a booming voice over the intercom. "Officer Mercer and Sergeant Slate report to Captain Ellis's office immediately. Dress uniforms." Mercer, who had just returned to the precinct from his garage, adjusted his tie and smirked at Slate. "Dress uniforms? They don't call you in for that unless you're getting a commendation or a press conference. 2 kilos of street-ready poison off the streets," Slate practically purred. "We're local heroes, Blaine." They walked through the bullpen with their chests puffed out. Junior officers parted ways for them, unaware of the grim reality hovering over the precinct. Mercer knocked sharply on the frosted glass of the captain's door before pushing it open. "You wanted to see us, Captain," Mercer began, but the words died in his throat. The room was not filled with local brass or adoring press. Captain Ellis was sitting behind his desk, but he looked completely pale, his hands resting flat on the blotter. Flanking him were 4 individuals wearing dark tactical vests with FBI emblazoned across the front in stark yellow lettering. Standing by the window was Lena Holt, the dreaded head of Internal Affairs, holding a thick manila folder, and standing directly in the center of the room, arms crossed over a crisp black suit, was Captain Dominic Vale of the DEA. Mercer's instinct screamed at him to run, but his feet were cemented to the floor. Slate's face drained of color, his jaw going slack. What is this?" Slate stammered, looking frantically between his captain and the feds. "Sergeant Slate, Officer Mercer," Agent Pierce said. stepping forward with a pair of heavy federal handcuffs dangling from his fingers. "Please come in and close the door. We have a lot to discuss regarding your retirement plans." "I don't understand," Mercer lied, feigning indignation. "We are in the middle of writing up a major narcotics bust." "Are you?" Vale countered, his voice a low, dangerous rumble. He reached into his coat and tossed a small black device onto the desk. It was an audio player. He pressed a button and the crisp, high-definition recording filled the silent office. "$500,000, Corbin." That's the whisper. "We hit her. We take the bag. We toss a couple bricks of that seized brown we kept from the warehouse raid last month into her back seat. Case closed." Mercer felt his knees threaten to buckle. He recognized his own voice. He recognized the heavy rain in the background. "You guys really should check your suspects for federal transmitting wires before you brag about stealing government property," Vale said, a cold smile touching his lips. "This is a setup," Slate shouted, his voice cracking with panic. "That audio is doctored. The woman we arrested is Vanessa Holt. She's a known cartel associate." "Is she?" The door behind them opened. Mercer and Slate spun around. Standing in the doorway was the woman they had brutally shoved against a car hours earlier. She wasn't wearing the damp, cheap leather jacket or the terrified expression of a cornered street mule. Lila Langston was impeccably dressed in her formal DEA tactical uniform, her gold badge gleaming brightly on her belt, her duty weapon secured at her hip. The look in her eyes was cold, unyielding, and utterly triumphant. "Hello, boys," Lila said softly, her voice carrying the lethal weight of absolute justice. "I believe you have my $500,000. The silence that followed was suffocating. The reality of the situation crashed over the corrupt cops like a physical blow. They hadn't robbed a cartel mule. They had assaulted, framed, and robbed an undercover federal agent who had been recording their every breath. "Lila Langston, DEA, Special Operations." Lila introduced herself, stepping fully into the room and staring Mercer directly in the eyes. "And you two are a disgrace to that badge." "No, no, no," Mercer whispered, backing away until his shoulders hit the wall. Agent Pierce didn't hesitate. He moved in, grabbing Mercer roughly by the arm and spinning him around, slamming him against the wall with the exact same unnecessary force Mercer had used on Lila hours earlier. "Blaine Mercer!" "Corbin Slate," Pierce barked, the metal ratchets of the handcuffs echoing loudly in the small office. "You are under arrest for conspiracy to distribute narcotics, grand theft of federal funds, civil rights violations under the color of law, evidence tampering, and multiple counts of perjury. You have the right to remain silent. I strongly suggest you use it." As they were marched out of the captain's office in chains, the entire bullpen watched in stunned silence. There were no high fives this time. The illusion of their untouchable empire was shattered permanently. That same evening, Operation Undertow reached its explosive climax. DEA tactical teams, using the intelligence Lila had painstakingly gathered, raided 3 separate warehouses simultaneously. Silas Granger was dragged from his bed in handcuffs, his multi-million-dollar empire dismantled in less than 30 minutes. The fallout was catastrophic for the corrupt officers. The federal government showed absolutely no mercy. During the trial, Lila took the stand. Her testimony was a masterclass in surgical precision that systematically dismantled every lie Mercer and Slate tried to spin. The dashcam footage, the audio recordings, and the marked bills found in Mercer's garage were an insurmountable mountain of evidence. Hard karma had finally come to collect its debt. Judge Theodore Lang, the same judge they had banked on to throw Lila away, presided over their federal sentencing. He looked down at them with a mixture of pity and absolute disgust. "You took an oath to protect the vulnerable, and instead you became the very monsters we are sworn to fight," Judge Lang declared, his gavel raised. "I sentence you both to 25 years in federal prison without the possibility of parole." As the bailiffs led Mercer and Slate away, their heads hung low in utter defeat. Lila Langston sat quietly in the back of the courtroom. She didn't cheer. She didn't smile. She just closed her eyes, exhaled a long breath, and found peace knowing the streets were finally a little safer. She stood up, adjusted her jacket, and walked out into the sunlight. There was always another cartel, another corrupt system, another battle waiting, and Lila would be ready. If this story of absolute justice and hard karma kept you on the edge of your seat, hit that like button to support real heroes who risk their lives in the shadows. Don't forget to share this intense drama with your friends and subscribe to our channel for more pulse-pounding stories where the bad guys finally get what they deserve. Drop a comment below. What would you have done in Lila's shoes? See you in the next video. Hello, my name is Board Justice, the owner and manager of Board Justice. After watching the video, I saw how police framed an undercover DEA agent. I'd really like to know what you think. How did the story make you feel? For me, the strongest feeling was relief that the truth finally came to light. What stayed with me wasn't just the unexpected reveal that Lila was an undercover DEA agent, but the reminder that abuse of authority can have serious consequences and that integrity still matters. Watching patience and solid evidence overcome corruption made the ending especially satisfying. I'm curious which moment had the biggest impact on you. Was it the traffic stop, the reveal of Lila's true identity, or the moment the officers realized the evidence had been working against them all along? And if you had been in Lila's position, do you think you could have stayed as calm under that kind of pressure? One lesson I took from this story is that staying composed and letting the facts speak for themselves can be more powerful than reacting in anger. In everyday life, treating people fairly and avoiding quick assumptions can make a real difference. If this story gave you something to think about, I'd love to read your thoughts in the comments. And if you enjoy stories about justice, accountability, and perseverance, feel free to like the video or subscribe if you think it's worth your time.